I thought I was planning my mom's perfect birthday dinner. Instead, one argument ripped open a secret my parents had been hiding from me for 20 years, and it changed everything I believed about my family and myself. The dining room smelled of roasted garlic and rosemary, the table adorned with Mom's favorite peonies, their petals soft and pink against the crisp white tablecloth. Emily had spent all afternoon in the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour as she kneaded dough for homemade dinner rolls, her mother's favorite. It was December 2, 2023, and Susan Rhodes was turning 55. Emily, ever the peacekeeper, had planned the evening meticulously. A menu of herb-crusted lamb, garlic mashed potatoes, and a chocolate torte for dessert, all paired with a playlist of Mom's beloved jazz standards humming softly in the background. She'd even convinced her younger brother, Caleb, to fly in from Chicago, despite his hectic grad school schedule. Their older sister, Lauren, had promised to be on her best behavior, which was no small feat given her tendency to spark arguments with their father, Richard. Emily's goal was simple: one perfect night for her family, a rare moment of harmony. The Rhodes family wasn't dysfunctional in the dramatic, made-for-TV sense, but they were a patchwork of unspoken tensions. Richard, a retired history professor, was stoic and intellectual, his affection buried under layers of pragmatism. Susan, a high school counselor, was warm but prone to overanalyzing everyone's emotions, often to their annoyance. Lauren, 30, was a corporate lawyer with a sharp tongue and a chip on her shoulder about being the eldest, always expected to set the example. Caleb, 23, was the charming but aimless baby of the family, skating by on wit and avoiding responsibility. Emily, caught in the middle, had spent her life mediating their clashes, soothing hurt feelings and steering conversations away from dangerous topics. Tonight, she thought, would be different. Tonight, they'd just be a family celebrating a milestone. The evening started well enough. Caleb arrived first, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder, his grin as boyish as ever. You outdid yourself," he said, sniffing the air as he hugged her. "Mom's gonna cry when she sees this spread." Lauren showed up next, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, her navy blazer pristine despite the 3-hour drive from Boston. "Not bad, kid," she said, surveying the table with a nod of approval. Richard and Susan arrived together, straight from a matinee at the local theater, Susan's eyes already misty as she took in the peonies. "Oh, Emily, you didn't have to go to all this trouble," she said, pulling her daughter into a hug. Richard, as usual, said little, but his hand rested briefly on Emily's shoulder, a rare gesture of warmth. They sat down to dinner, the clink of wine glasses and the murmur of small talk filling the room. Emily felt a flicker of pride as her family laughed over Caleb's stories about his chaotic roommates and Susan's recounting of her students' latest antics. Even Lauren seemed relaxed, her usual edge softened by a second glass of Pinot Noir. Emily allowed herself to believe the night might pass without incident. Then it started. It was subtle at first, a stray comment from Lauren about Richard's recent op-ed in the local paper, something about education reform that she called out of touch. Richard's jaw tightened, but he responded evenly, citing statistics about standardized testing. Lauren rolled her eyes, and Emily shot her a pleading look, hoping to derail the brewing tension. But Susan, ever the mediator in her own right, jumped in, trying to pivot the conversation to something neutral. "Let's not talk shop tonight," she said brightly. "This is about celebrating, right?" If only it had stopped there. Caleb, perhaps emboldened by the wine or just oblivious to the undercurrents, made a joking remark about Richard's ivory tower days at the university, implying he'd been more interested in books than his kids. It was meant to be lighthearted, but Richard's face darkened. "You've got a lot to say for someone who's still figuring out how to pay his own rent," he shot back. Caleb flushed, and Lauren, never one to let their father have the last word, jumped in. "Oh, please, Dad, like you were ever around to teach us anything useful." Emily's stomach knotted. She tried to intervene, her voice calm but firm. "Guys, come on, it's Mom's birthday. Let's just enjoy the food, okay?" But the air had shifted, charged with years of unspoken grievances. Susan's smile faltered, her hands twisting the napkin in her lap. "Let's not do this tonight," she said softly, but no one listened. The argument escalated faster than Emily could track. Lauren accused Richard of favoring Caleb because he was the only son, a claim that made Caleb scoff and counter that Lauren had always been the golden child. Richard, his voice rising, defended himself, saying he'd sacrificed his career ambitions to provide for them. Susan tried to mediate, her voice trembling as she begged everyone to calm down, but her words only seemed to fuel the fire. Emily felt like she was watching a car crash in slow motion, powerless to stop it. Then Lauren crossed a line. "You act like you were some saint, Dad, but you were barely there. You think we didn't notice you sneaking off to your study every night, or those conferences that lasted weeks?" Her tone was venomous, the implication clear. Richard's face went pale, then red. Susan gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Emily's heart pounded. She'd never heard Lauren go this far. The room fell silent, the only sound the soft tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Richard stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "You want to talk about absence, Lauren?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Maybe you should ask your mother why I was gone so often." Susan's eyes widened, a look of pure panic crossing her face. "Richard, don't," she whispered, but he ignored her. Emily's pulse raced. "Dad, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced at Susan, who looked like she might be sick. Caleb was frozen, his fork halfway to his mouth. Lauren leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Go on, Dad, say it." Richard's gaze locked on Emily, and for a moment she saw something she'd never seen in her father's eyes. Regret, raw and unguarded. "You were never supposed to know," he said, his voice breaking. "But since we're airing everything tonight, Emily, when you were 6, you weren't just sick. You were in the hospital for 3 months. Not for pneumonia like we told you, for leukemia." The word hit Emily like a physical blow. She stared at him, her mind scrambling to process it. "Leukemia," she repeated, her voice sounding foreign to her own ears. "But I don't remember that." Susan was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "We didn't want you to carry that weight," she said, her voice thick with guilt. "You were so young and you pulled through. We thought it was better to let you believe it was just a bad flu." Emily's head spun. She remembered bits and pieces of that year, long hospital stays, her mother's worried face, the strange machines beeping beside her bed. But leukemia. How could they have kept that from her? "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice rising. "I had a right to know," Richard's shoulders sagged. "Because I couldn't handle it," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I couldn't handle seeing you like that, Emily. Those months, they broke me. I started staying away, taking on extra work, anything to avoid coming home and facing it. Your mother begged me to stay, but I couldn't. I failed you." The room was suffocatingly quiet. Lauren's face had softened, her earlier anger replaced by shock. Caleb looked like he might cry. Susan reached for Emily's hand, but Emily pulled away, her mind reeling. All those years, she'd thought her father's distance was just his personality, his academic obsession, his need for solitude. Now she saw it for what it was, cowardice or maybe shame. "You failed me," Emily said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "You let me think I was just some kid you didn't care about. Do you know how many nights I wondered why you didn't love me?" Her words hung in the air, sharp and unforgiving. Susan sobbed, and Richard looked like he'd been slapped. "Emily, I'm so sorry," he said, but she was already standing, her chair tipping over as she backed away from the table. "I need air," she muttered, stumbling toward the back door. The cold December night hit her like a wave as she stepped onto the porch, her breath visible in the frosty air. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to make sense of the bombshell that had just detonated her world. Inside, she could hear raised voices again, Lauren and Caleb arguing with their parents, the chaos reigniting. But Emily couldn't go back in, not yet. She sank onto the porch steps, her mind racing. Leukemia. A secret kept for 20 years. Her father's absence, her mother's overprotectiveness, the way they'd all tiptoed around certain memories. It all made sense now, and yet it made nothing clear. Who was she, if not the healthy, happy daughter she'd believed herself to be? What else had they hidden? The door creaked behind her, and Caleb stepped out, his coat slung over one arm. He said softly, sitting beside her. "You okay?" She laughed bitterly. "No, Caleb, I'm not okay. I had cancer, and they lied to me my whole life. How am I supposed to be okay?" He nodded, his usual lightness gone. "I didn't know either," he said. "I was too young to remember much, but I can't believe they kept it from us." Emily wiped at her eyes, realizing she was crying. "I spent so long trying to keep this family together," she said, "and now I find out it was built on lies." Caleb put an arm around her, and for a moment they just sat there, the cold seeping into their bones. Inside, the argument had quieted, replaced by the low murmur of Susan's voice, probably trying to salvage the night. But Emily knew nothing would be the same. The peacekeeper role she'd clung to felt like a lie now, too. How could she mediate when she didn't even know the truth about herself? Over the next few weeks, Emily grappled with the revelation. She requested her medical records, confirming the diagnosis. acute lymphoblastic leukemia, treated successfully when she was 6. She met with a therapist, trying to untangle the anger and betrayal she felt toward her parents. Susan apologized endlessly, explaining how they'd wanted to protect her from fear and stigma. Richard, true to form, retreated into silence, though he sent her a long, handwritten letter admitting his guilt and shame. Lauren and Caleb tried to support her, but they were dealing with their own shock and resentment. Emily began to see her family not as a unit she had to hold together, but as a group of flawed, hurting people who'd done their best and failed in ways that left scars. She started setting boundaries, refusing to play the peacekeeper when arguments flared. She focused on herself for the first time, exploring what it meant to be a survivor, not just of cancer, but of a family that had shaped her in ways she was only beginning to understand. The night of December 2, 2023, wasn't just the end of Emily's role as the family's glue. It was the beginning of her reckoning with who she was, what she deserved, and how to rebuild trust in a family that had kept her in the dark for so long. The peonies wilted, the torte went uneaten, but Emily's journey toward truth was just starting. So that is for today's story. If you like the story, share with others, and hit that subscribe button for this type of more stories.